Hey everyone, in this video, I'll be going over a Titan build that combines point contact cannon brace and Monte Carlo to turn you into an unstoppable juggernaut. Let's get right into it. Point contact cannon brace comes with the intrinsic trait Hammer of the Gods. Defeating targets with your Thunderclap melee restores melee energy. Targets near you when you use your Thunderclap suffer lightning strikes and become jolted. Being amplified increases the damage of these lightning strikes. With this souped up Thunderclap, we can clear an entire room of enemies, jolt and deal big damage to majors and bosses all with one punch. Plus, it's just so satisfying charging up your melee and unleashing a thunderstorm on anything foolish enough to come near you. Since this is a melee focused build, Monte Carlo will synergize perfectly. Monte Carlo comes with the intrinsic trait, Monte Carlo Method. Dealing damage with this weapon reduces your melee cooldown and grants a chance to fully charge your melee ability with each kill. This will ensure that we have constant thunderclaps and eliminate having to wait around for our melee to recharge. Monte Carlo comes with the perk Markov Chain. This weapon gains increased damage from melee kills and kills with this weapon. Melee kills grant ammo for this weapon. With this perk, we create a gameplay loop of shooting and punching. Our melee kills will beef up our Monte Carlo damage, and kills with Monte Carlo will give us our melee energy back. But it gets even better because this season, Monte Carlo got a catalyst. The catalyst comes with the perk Stochastic Vengeance. At 5 stacks of Markov Chain, reload button long press switches between your melee attack and Monte Carlo's bayonet. Landing a bayonet melee hit grants melee energy. With this bayonet melee, we now have 2 powerful melee attacks. Number 1, a boosted thunderclap that can clear entire rooms of enemies, and 2, a bayonet stab that deals massive damage to a single target. The only problem with this build is figuring out what to do with all this power. Speaking of which, let's move on to the rest of the build. For the class ability, we're using Towering Barricade in case we get into trouble or we have to hold a position. For our melee, obviously, we're using Thunderclap to get all the benefits from our exotic. For our grenade, we're running Pulse Grenades for great area of effect damage. We can enhance these grenades with our first aspect, Touch of Thunder. With Touch of Thunder, our Pulse Grenades create ionic traces periodically as they damage targets and increase in damage over time. Our grenades will now feed us ability energy with these ionic traces and deal big damage. They're most effective when tagging a major or a boss. Our second aspect is Knockout. Critically wounding a target or breaking their shield infuses your melee attacks with arc energy and increases your melee range and damage for a short time. Defeating targets with this melee attack starts health regeneration and makes you amplified. It's the second part of this aspect that we really want. Every time we get a kill with a thunderclap or the bayonet, we proc our health regen and increase our survivability. For the super, we're running Thunder Crash for great burst damage, ideally against bosses. For the fragments, we have Spark of Resistance. While surrounded by combatants, you are more resistant to incoming damage. Very helpful for a close quarters build like this one. Spark of Shock. Your arc grenades jolt targets. Now our grenades jolt targets, create ionic traces, and deal increased damage over time. We could make a build around these bad boys if we wanted. Maybe an Armamentarium or Heart of Inmost Light build, but I digress. Spark of Ions. Defeating a jolted target creates an ionic trace. Our Thunderclap melee will also create ionic traces, providing us with more ability energy since it jolts targets. Spark of Feedback. Taking melee damage briefly increases your outgoing melee damage. This one is risky but so satisfying that you can time it right. For Orb of Power generation, we're using Kinetic Siphon and Heavy Handed. Considering this build revolves around Thunderclaps and Monte Carlo, we'll be constantly generating Orbs of Power with these 2 mods. For ability energy, we have Hands On for super energy on melee kills, Impact Induction for grenade energy with melee kills, and finally 2 bomber mods to reduce our grenade cooldown when using our class ability. We don't really need to worry about using mods to generate melee energy since Monte Carlo takes care of that. We'll need a recuperation mod for healing. This will give us 70 HP when picking up an Orb of Power. Any elemental resist mods will do, depending on the activity you're doing. For surge mods, this one is optional, but I like to run a kinetic weapon surge mod, which will give me a 10% increased damage to Monte Carlo when picking up an Orb of Power. This also stacks with Markov Chain for even more damage. For the stats and other weapons, I'd recommend running 100 Resilience for this build, considering you'll be getting up close and personal. You want that extra 30% resistance. For special and heavy weapons, you can run any weapons you want. I like running a special grenade launcher with blinding grenades and auto-loading holster as a primer for my Thunderclaps. And for my heavy, I'm running Cold Comfort with Collective Action and Envious Assassin for boss damage. It's so good. Well, that's the build. Thanks for watching. Make sure you hit that like button and subscribe for more videos. Until next time.